Welcome back to A Shark's Perspective. So, when you wake up and check your social feed, are you looking for branded content and ads? Do you enjoy being sold to on social media? Who is listening to this is a fair question that today's guest asks. Is this the end of marketing as we know it? Carlos Gil is the CEO and founder of Gil Media, a social media strategist and storyteller, a speaker, and an author of a provocative new book called The End of Marketing. And on this episode, we'll discuss some bold predictions and statements on social media and marketing, the AI apocalypse, being considered a top influencer, keeping it 100 with authenticity, breaking a few eggs, the education of marketers, DJ Khaled, Rihanna, the Kardashians, the Fire Festival, just doing hard work, and a lot more. So let's tune into a social media egg breaker with a shark who, pretty much breaks every egg on this episode of A Shark's Perspective. Carlos, thank you so much for joining us today on A Shark's Perspective. So, for people that need to hear a good speaker and read a good book, I wish you'd tell us just a minute or so about yourself and your career today.
Yeah, so Kenneth, it's great to be here on the podcast with you. Thank you so much for the opportunity. So a little bit about myself. I've worked in social media marketing now for the last 11 years. It's crazy to say 11 because it seems like I just got started in the industry yesterday.
That's OG for social media, though.
It really is. And it's funny because we have like these OGs in the social media industry. And I think people don't necessarily associate Carlos Gil with being an OG just because on the surface you see me as a young guy. But I got started doing this really young. I'm 36 now. I got started at 25. And when I started working in social media, it actually happened as a result of layoffs. So I worked in the banking industry. I lost my job. And the same day I lost my job, I joined LinkedIn, and it was through LinkedIn where I became inspired to start up an online job board called Jobs Direct USA. And for the first few years that I was in this space, social media was really my gateway to the world, not just to grow my business, but to generate awareness and PR. And in the process, I started growing a network. So I never really jumped into this industry with the idea being, I'm going to build a brand and eventually write a book and get into public speaking. I really jumped into this space out of necessity because I didn't have a marketing budget. I had a startup right. And I was trying to grow a startup during the recession.
Right. Your startup was you.
The startup was me. I was the product, very much so. Now, with that being said, my career took me in a few different directions. I ended up getting hired by one of my clients in Winn-Dixie. I was their first head of social media, and that was in 2012. From there, I worked at a few different brands, including LinkedIn, running social media. And today I have my own marketing agency in Gil Media Co. And I also have a new book called The End of Marketing, in addition to speaking on the topic extensively of social media marketing.
Yeah, so I've seen you at several digital summits where we've both spoken, but I will clearly admit that I have come in several times to see you speak, as I've spoken at several of them as well. I know you're traveling the country speaking at all of their events, and you're a really great speaker. I love the energy, and I think the topics that you hit, if you think about knowing your audience, it is just a fantastic topic for Digital Summit's audience. But you speak at a lot of different conferences all over the country as well. I've seen several of the posts you've done where you're speaking at this event or another. What's sort of the gist of most of the conferences where people can find you? Are they generally media, social media, marketing conferences, or is it anything and everything?
It's interesting that you asked me that, because if we were having this conversation 5 or 6 years ago, when I worked specifically in marketing within grocery, a lot of the conferences I was attending back then, speaking at, they were retail related, they were grocery related. And then once I started working at LinkedIn and then BMC Software, the conferences I started speaking at primarily became marketing focused, so more of industry conferences. Now I'm actually starting to see that pendulum swing the other way with the release of End of Marketing, with just my brand getting out onto more stages across the world. I'm starting to get offered opportunities to speak for industry conferences. For example, I spoke for Merrill Lynch earlier this year at a conference specifically for the financial services industry. Next week, I'm speaking in Sarasota, Florida for the nonprofit industry. So what I would suggest to anyone that's looking to get into the business of speaking is carve out your niche, not so much within an industry, but be the go-to subject matter expert, whether it's marketing or in my case back then, it was Snapchat, whatever your focus is, and then make yourself available as that go-to subject matter expert for not just marketing conferences, but for industry conferences. And what I see in industries, like, and I'll give you a really good example, in real estate. Over the last couple of years, I was successful in carving a lane for myself. The real estate industry doesn't have an abundance of social media experts or people are
Right. Yeah.
speaking on the topic of social media. Like, they have their thought leaders that are also real estate agents, but like their day job is real estate. It's not marketing.
Mhm.
So I found that by getting within the real estate industry and really becoming a go-to thought leader, I was able to really separate myself from just the marketing industry where you have hundreds of people that do the same thing that I do.
Yeah, I agree, but I can't imagine that anything is more exciting than a grocery industry conference. I mean, you could talk about produce,
Old school,
meats.
man. Groceries, hella old school.
I
You're
bet.
talking about print circulars and billboards in almost the year 2020, when the conversations we should have been having almost 10 years ago would have been around mobile apps and social media.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Well, part of your story I also love, I wish you'd kind of dive into a little bit more, is when you started Job Direct USA, because a lot of people would have folded, but did you have a background at all in recruiting or hiring or building personal brands? I mean, how did you take that layoff and turn it into Jobs Direct USA?
That's such a good question, Shark. The easy answer is no. I didn't have any experience in recruiting. Talk about like the ultimate fake it till you make it, which, by the way, I can't stand when I hear people give that as advice, because I don't think that you should fake your way to anything. You should just
Yeah.
try to find ways to make it. In my
Yeah.
case,
Good
man,
point.
I wanted to help people find jobs. I was 25 years old at the time. I felt like I was at a peak of my career, like I was in my prime, even though I was extremely young. And I felt, I just got burned by the recession. Uh, my wife is 8 months pregnant. I've got a young family. What am I going to do? I don't have any money, to really fall back on. I worked for a company at the time. It was AIG, that executives were getting these golden parachutes, and it was really like the fire within me that was lit. That instead of complaining about my situation, which I think nowadays we see a lot of people taking to social media when they lose that job to complain about the employer. Instead, I said, I'm going to help people find jobs. And it was literally, man, one of the things I'm most proud of doing throughout my entire
I
life,
bet.
more so than writing a book, because I was at this just low moment in my life and in my career where I didn't know where my next dollar was going to come from. I suffered financially as a result of that era, lost it all, hit rock bottom. But there's one thing I gained, or actually, there's two things that I gained. Actually, I'm going to say three. One is confidence,
Hmm.
confidence and belief in myself, faith. Another would be
Hmm.
connections.
Yeah.
I'm a big proponent of social networking, not so much from the sales standpoint, but from the standpoint of using social media to build a network. Because, as you know, your net worth is your network. And I'd say three, the experience and knowledge that I gained in marketing, which is not something I went to school for. I didn't go to college until I was 30, so it's not like I had a master's in marketing that I just knew how to grow a business.
Hmm.
The reality is, at 25 years old, I was not a good entrepreneur. But if there's something that I figured out how to do really well, was growth hack the hell have social media to connect with people and make myself known. And to be frank with you, it's no different than today.
Yeah.
And the things I was doing back then are no different than what all of us are doing today in terms of building a brand and using social media to sell and using it to connect with prospects, etc.
Nothing makes you more innovative in your look at your own personal brand than getting laid off and having a pregnant wife. So, I mean, that's a great story. So, what did you end up doing with the site? Did you sell it off, or?
That's a good question. So I ended up getting hired by Winn-Dixie at the end of 2011. The site itself just, it went away.
Yeah.
There's no sexy exit story. There was no exit. There was no money that I raised. The site in itself just kind of went away. It died, so to speak.
Yeah.
I wish I could say, I sold it for millions of dollars, but that wasn't the case. I went to go work, and I remember going to the Cheesecake Factory, and sitting down with my wife at the time, and having a conversation and just saying, hey, look, this is an opportunity for us to get back on our feet financially. I just got offered this amazing opportunity to run social media at Winn-Dixie, and I'm going to step away from being an entrepreneur and I'm going to go work for a corporation.
Yeah.
And it was one of the best decisions I could have made at the time because it really helped me gain experience in professional marketing, working on a corporate level, which I didn't have before. And quite frankly, man, all those lessons between starting up a business during the recession, going to work for a corporation and starting social media from the ground up, eventually working for a social network, to then now speaking and writing a book, like all of that had to happen in order for me to get to this point. And I wouldn't change it, for anything.
So you went back and got your college degree. Why? I mean, you've got so. Oh,
so I actually didn't get my college degree.
Okay. Why did you decide to go back to college?
I got accepted into an executive MBA program, and what happened, Kenneth, was right around the age of 30. I started evaluating, what do I want to do with my career? Like, where are things going to go from here? And it was almost like a light bulb went off in my head. And I said to myself, all right, I helped this corporation in Winn-Dixie get on social media. Things are going great. But I also know that there's something else greater for me than this. I was living in Jacksonville, Florida at the time. No disrespect to Jacksonville, but there's not an abundance of opportunities career-wise like there is in a bigger market like in LA or San Francisco, Chicago, New York, etc. Mm-hmm. I'm from South Florida. I was born and raised in Fort Lauderdale. So I started looking at jobs in the greater Miami market. And I interviewed at Burger King's corporate headquarters to run social media. Didn't get the job because I didn't have a degree. I interviewed at Visa's corporate headquarters for Latin America in Miami. Didn't get the job because I didn't have a degree. I interviewed with the Miami Heat. Didn't get the job because I didn't have a degree. And then ultimately came down to, I was in the runnings for a job running social media at Gatorade in Chicago, and they were going to hire me. And they called me. And they're like, hey, Carlos, we're getting ready to make you an offer, but we noticed on your application that you didn't list where you went to college. Now, mind you, I went through multiple rounds of interviews, went through final interviews, and case in point, at no point did anyone stop and like review my application. They were evaluating me on the surface, obviously, the experience I brought, everything I was telling them in the interviews, etc. Long story short, I didn't get the job, and I was devastated. And I realized that in corporate America, it's not so much the experience that you bring to the table that they value. It's the degree. It's corporate for a reason. Mm-hmm. And you're being interviewed by people that have masters and bachelors, and it's old school, man. Like there's no other way for me to put it into context. So I said to myself, I'm going to stop fighting the current, and I'm going to go to college. I got into an executive MBA program at Jacksonville University. I went to a couple semesters, and I ended up dropping out. And when I was there, and it was a very expensive 2 semesters I was there, it was about $20,000. And when I was there, I started realizing like the things I'm learning here, I'm never going to apply to a marketing job because I've already worked in corporate marketing, and I'm having to learn calculus and, all these different, curriculum that I just know for a fact I'm not going to apply in my career. It's kind of a waste of time. Mm-hmm. So what I will say is, looking back on it, if I had to go get a job now as a chief marketing officer at a corporation, forget the degree. Like I've already shown success without a degree. I know marketing really well. There's Fortune 100 companies that trust me to consult for them. But what I'm trying to say here is you have to let time do its work. And I think that's the key that I want people listening to this to walk away with, that, you've got to be patient. And I know that sounds cliche, but as long as you do good work, that good work in itself will pay itself off in the long run. Like the work that you do, the experience that you gain, it all has value. You become wiser, you become smarter, you actually have case studies that you can speak to, and all that is worth more, in my opinion, than a degree ever will be worth.
Yeah, but just think how far you could have gotten if you'd gotten a degree and gotten stuck in corporate America and been bored to tears. You'd be doing social media wrong somewhere. So, because that's probably a slow death.
I've ran social media for different companies, Kenneth, and I'll tell you, man, it's first of all, the experience that you gain working in corporate is great. So I don't want to talk smack on corporate. Corporations pay my bills to this day, but you're always going to be limited when you work within someone else's sandbox.
Agreed.
Like that's the reality. You're super assertive and goal driven, and you're a risk taker, like I would consider myself like a maverick working in corporate America. I study this stuff. I'm reading TechCrunch. I'm going to conferences, rubbing elbows with people. When you come back into the office, you're just the senior manager of social media or the director of marketing.
Yeah.
You're not given the same amount of respect. And that's something that's hard to kind of counterbalance if you're a go-getter.
Very much so.
Your ceiling is always going to be limited working in corporate.
No, I am not I'm same way. I'm not a PM that wants to push stuff to another agency or stare at Excel files all day. That's just a slow death I couldn't handle. So let's jump into the book, The End of Marketing. So I think everybody should bow with us in a moment of silence, because Carlos has declared that marketing as we know it is dead. But seriously, what sort of made you come up with the idea that marketing as we know it is dead, and what inspired you to write the book?
So it's funny that you mentioned moment of silence, because in my new 2020 keynote for the End of Marketing, I actually have a slide that says,
"Oh, there you go."
May we, moment of silence. Yeah. May we rebrand in peace. Here's the thing.
You got to bring out a bottle. You got to bring out a bottle of whiskey though, of some sort, and drink one. Here's one for your homie.
Oh,
it's like a good video.
I'm already animated as it is on stage. I can only imagine
that's
if
true.
You shot whiskey, 2 minutes into a keynote, man, I'd be lit. Here's the thing. Marketing, as we know, has been dead for a while. And we, the marketers, and those of us that are using social media to sell, continue to water down the product every single day. And I would now compare a platform like Twitter or Facebook to no different than the radio. Right? I personally pay premium subscription fees for Apple Music, Pandora, and Spotify, which all play the same songs just to avoid hearing commercials. People don't want to be sold to. They want to be engaged. And they're tired of seeing brands in their feed force their way to get their attention. So the premise of the End of Marketing is that if your brand is going to survive the AI apocalypse, which is coming very soon, we're already seeing it happen, then you need to find ways to humanize your brand. And what that really means is you're replacing your logo with a face, with a voice. And if you don't do it, your brand, at least digitally speaking, will cease to exist. It's a very bold statement. It's a very bold prediction, but I stand by it. You ask any single person, anyone, just go to Twitter right now and ask your followers, do you enjoy being sold to? I ask this question in every single keynote that I've done for probably the last 3 years. Raise your hand if you go on Facebook every morning to see what your favorite brand of all time posted. And you know what? Not a single hand goes up. And I use myself as an example. I say to people, look, I wear, Ferragamo shoes, and I love Cole Haan, and this is the brand of jeans I wear. And you know what? I don't follow any of these brands on social media. Why would I follow a single brand on social media when I don't need to follow the brand? If it's American Airlines, because I fly with them, I send them a direct message if I need something from them. If it's Marriott, I send them a direct message. So brands need to understand what their place in this entire digital ecosystem is. And they also need to realize that they're competing with people. Like Carlos Gil's a brand, right? You are a brand. Anyone listening to this podcast is a brand, and you have influence, and you have reach, and you have power. And quite frankly, that power is greater than billion-dollar corporations are struggling just to stay relevant.
So I get your point completely, and I've heard the presentation, and I thoroughly enjoy it. What I find very hard for brands to swallow, though, as good as it is if, and you've talked about this on other shows and podcasts, but you've got your person who's trying to justify their job for a quarter, a year or whatever with financing. You've got a CMO that's got to do that. He's got to justify his to the CEO. The CEO's got to justify himself to the board, and then the shareholders if it's a public company that large. When you go in and tell a Fortune 100 company to do this, how are they going about implementing that change if they are agreeing with you? Because I think by nature, it's kind of the scorpion and the frog. As much as it makes sense, it's still in the scorpion's nature to put an ad anywhere and everywhere that it can be.
You know, Kenneth, I like to think that my knife is pretty sharp at this point, working in the space as many years as I have.
Yeah.
So when I sat down and wrote this book, I analyzed a couple things right out of the jump before I even wrote a single word. One, the name itself is going to alienate people. It's going to alienate fellow marketers. It's going to alienate, individuals that feel threatened by the title itself, the end of marketing. Here's the reality, and you can call me brash all you want. Most people that have marketing in their job title aren't marketers. They don't understand marketing.
Agreed.
They themselves don't have a brand. They themselves are not consuming content online every single day. They are paper pushers. They're checking off boxes. They're almost like campaign managers, right?
Mm-hmm.
They are not marketers. There's a difference between a marketer and someone who themselves is a brand and monetizes their presence on the internet. Now, with that being said, when I sat down and wrote this book, I said to myself, there's gonna be two people that pick up this book or see me speak in person. It's either the people that get it, and it's the people that don't get it. The people that don't get it, that say, you know what, this guy's brash, kind of arrogant, kind of cocky, those are the ones I really want them to read the book. Because what the end of marketing really is, Kenneth, is the framework for you, not just to humanize your brand, but to future-proof your business. So I want the CMOs that say, you know what, I think this guy's full of it. We're not going to do employee advocacy. We're going to keep doing what we're doing. Those are the CMOs that when they get bounced out of their job where they're currently at will struggle because they don't have a presence on LinkedIn. They're not networking. They're not building their brand. They're not speaking at conferences. It starts at the C-suite, quite frankly. And then from there, it trickles down. Now, so that's like addressing, the elephant in the room. You're going to have the C-suite. I also wrote this book as a pitch deck because let's face it, I own an agency. And I want for when brands to open up and read about social listening, I want the CMO or head of marketing to go directly to his or her head of social and say, hey, are we doing this? And really grill them. And if they're not doing it, I want them to call Gill Media. And I want them to call me directly and bring me in for a workshop or bring my team in to help work with them. And that's, social listening, employee advocacy, like every single chapter in itself could be turned into a keynote. It could be turned into a pitch deck. It could be turned into a presentation. So understand that. Then there's the camp of the people that do get it. And those tend to be a little bit more on the junior side, because when I do a lot of these keynotes, one thing I do really well, Kenneth, is I take time to speak to people afterward. And you saw this recently when we both spoke in Charlotte together. And typically the individuals that are coming up to me are junior to mid-level employees. And they're saying, you know what, I really wish you could speak to my boss because everything you said up there, I've been trying to tell him or her.
Right.
That is the consumer that I want to bring the end of marketing directly to his or her boss because they get it. Those are my soldiers. Those are my advocates, which I write about in the book. If you want to grow a brand, you need to build an army of advocates. What did I do for the last 5 to 6 months? I started promoting my book on social media as I was writing it. Why? To build up an army of advocates. So it's not that just I've written this book. I've also walked the walk. I talk the talk. And I want others to be able to learn from that and do the same thing again to future-proof their careers and their brands and their businesses. Because, man, it's like shit's getting really ready to hit the fan. You have AI influencers. They're getting ready to disrupt influencer marketing. You have companies like KFC. They're creating their own characters as AI, bots and influencers. You have brands like Wendy's that, you saw my presentation. I call them digital savages. Social media is the wild, wild west, man. There's no rules in this. And until, there's some sort of governing body that steps in that actually creates the infrastructure for how we all play nicely, it is what it is, man. It's a big sandbox. It's a big, giant digital ocean, and you have to find a way to survive. It's either sink or swim.
Yeah, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I agree with that premise completely. I just don't know that, I don't know what the magic formula is to help brands understand this better, because just by their nature, they're going to fall into that trap.
Let me break this down. This is a spoiler alert now. The magic formula is this. You as a brand are a corporation. Every time you show up on the scene, people are not listening to you because they don't want to hear from you. They perceive you to be an advertiser, so they're tuning you off. You as a corporation have hundreds, if not thousands of employees that work for you. Those thousands of people that you pay a paycheck to should be advocating for you because you pay them to work for you. And if you're building a really fun company culture with excitement, they should be tweeting and Facebooking and Instagramming how amazing of a company you are. So you got to start from within. That's like strategy one. That's your employee advocacy. Strategy two is if you're using social media to truly pay attention to who's talking about your brand, you probably have an army of advocates that already exist that you're not cultivating and engaging. So let's remove the actual brand from being the marketer and let's put the power of marketing back into the hands of the consumer, being the employee and the customer.
And I've heard you say this several times, that brands shouldn't sell so much, obviously, on social media, which makes perfect sense with what you speak at conferences, what I've heard you speak at before and on this show. But is there a level of selling on social that you're comfortable with, or you're seeing that brands are comfortable with at all? Or should it just be a no-sell playground?
First of all, let's address the elephant in the room, the obvious. We're all in business to sell.
Yeah.
I sell every single day through social media,
Yep.
and I have no problem asking people that I've cultivated relationships with to buy my book, to book me a speak at their conference, to bring me in to do a workshop, to consult. I have no problem with asking for the sale because I've already done my part with setting the stage to truly build a relationship. What most companies do a really poor job at is they just push content out and they expect that people are going to latch on, consume the content, and want to convert and buy.
Yeah.
And there's no magic bullet here on social media that you're going to just put out this content that's just so phenomenal and people are going to convert. Like what typically happens is people consume content, they talk about it. If your brand has a product or service that's bringing value to people, word kind of organically catches on. And I think that's something that's been lost upon most marketers. It's sales 101. People do business with who they want to do business with, who they like, who they trust, who they feel comfortable. So one of the kind of strategies or methodologies that I explain in marketing and throughout my keynotes also is that social media networks themselves, Kenneth, are one giant search engine. So when you think about this, Twitter in itself is a real-time search engine that you can go on there right now and you can type in keywords or phrases such as like looking for and then like insert what you do here. I do this every single day. I'm going on Twitter and I'm typing in call for speakers, looking for proposals. I'm doing this every single day because I see that social media, what it is a big gateway to connect me to people that are already talking. So you can either contribute to the noise and make more noise and have your brand kind of be watered down because it's just noisy and no one's paying attention, or you can just go one-on-one, be tactical, and connect with the people that truly are interested in hearing from you and form a relationship with them.
Agreed. So one of my favorite chapter titles is chapter 4, because I think it's a very perfect title for a lot of different things, but it says, don't be mad at Facebook, you just suck at marketing. And one of the things I'd love for you to elaborate on and unpack a little bit is the types of content to avoid posting on Facebook.
Here's the thing. Facebook, I compare it to a casino. And as long as you're putting money in the slot machine, you have a chance, right, to roll the dice, and that's Facebook ads. All these social networks themselves are digital advertising platforms. At the end of the day, that's what they are. We confuse them as being places where we go to hang out and consume content, but really what they're doing is they're capturing a lot of data and information on us in the back end. So once you know how the rules of the house are played, you just play by the house rules. You create content that lives on Facebook versus driving people away to your website or your blog or your YouTube channel. And that's perhaps the eye opener that when I do this presentation in person, when I do specifically like Facebook workshops, that people walk away with like, oh, wow, if I just take the content that already lives on my website, but upload it natively to Facebook, now I'm able to form conversation on my Facebook page. And all of a sudden my Facebook page becomes a destination that people want to visit because they're not viewing it as just another brand that's trying to sell.
Gotcha. So let's pivot then to, you explain in the book, and I've heard you do this in some of your presentations with DJ Khaled and Drake, but also you do this in the book with DJ Khaled and Kim Kardashian West. Explain to people in terms they can understand how you don't have to be, a famous music producer or one of the Kardashians with, 60 plus million followers on Twitter. Explain to them how they can relate to those kind of people as they apply their social media.
You just have to be real and relatable. at the end of the day. You don't have to be famous. You don't have to have millions of followers. Hell, I don't have millions of followers. But you know what? I can sell books.
Yeah.
I can get myself booked for gigs.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is because I realize what social media provides me is access. It's access to people. It's access to decision makers. Where most brands mess up is they expect that their customers will follow them everywhere they go on the internet. And like I said before, I spend thousands of dollars a year booking flights with American Airlines. I don't follow them anywhere. Thousands of dollars with Marriott.
Mm-hmm.
I don't follow them anywhere. There's no need for me to follow them.
Exactly.
Because I know that they're going to be there when I need to book a flight or book a hotel. I know that Ferragamo is going to still exist when I need to buy a pair of shoes. Gucci's still going to exist. So what I'm trying to say here is that brands need to reverse engineer what marketing really is. And instead of expecting consumers to flock to them, they need to go flock to the consumers. They need to create content that's perceived as being real and relatable. You start with your employees, you start with your customers. Forget influencer marketing. I'm not a fan of influencer marketing. And you're going to read that in the book. I say that influencer marketing straight up is BS. And the reason why I'm not a fan of it is because you can give a check to anyone for them to endorse your brand. So that in itself is not doing anything to move the needle forward. But when you are using social media to listen, to truly analyze who is a fan, who is a consumer already, then you just turn those individuals into the storytellers for your brand. You know, that's one. Two, it's going to find where your customers truly live. So if you're, for example, a high-end luxury brand like Louis Vuitton, you go on Instagram and you see all the people that are posting content about Louis Vuitton. Engage with their content. Thank them for being a customer. Like their content. Don't have this expectation that they need to come to you, because the new rules of the game are changing and you have to go find your customer. Unfortunately, what these social networks are, again, is databases for you to find exactly who your customers are.
Where do you see social media going over, say, the next decade?
Well, where I see social media going is first automation and AI. And I write about that quite a bit as the book progresses. You know, we're going to be seeing this AI apocalypse over the next decade. There's going to be thousands, if not millions, of jobs that are lost to artificial intelligence. I think the role of a marketer at a corporation, that in itself will change. You're going to start seeing marketers have to become more data scientists, true content creators themselves. I think you'll start seeing companies that are going to take kind of the influencer marketing model and hire individuals internally as heads of creative that know storytelling really well. And I think, again, you know, I spoke about it when we first started this interview. Brands will need to find ways to replace their logo with real people. So that means if you're Coca-Cola, instead of being, you know, the Coca-Cola logo, you have someone in a red t-shirt with Coca-Cola on it, humanizing your brand, you know, and the same thing applies if you're Nike. You know, if you're any single brand, you have the ability to do this right now to get ahead of the curve.
Yeah, I agree with you. I just think it's going to be fascinating to see how people replace the logo with various faces. Any hacks that you can kind of give us on how to beat the algorithms as well?
You know, here's the thing. Instead of trying to beat the algorithms, just play by the house rules and you'll be okay. You know, I do a lot of A/B testing on my social media channels. I see that when I don't post links that link out, I get higher engagement. I see that when I just post text-based content, I get higher engagement. When I ask questions for my community, I get higher engagement. Like, people can sniff through BS. They know when they're being sold to, they can tell when they're being advertised to. So remove that element from your marketing or your advertising. Just be real with people. Just have conversations. Like, at the end of the day, put the social back into social media. And I know that sounds like cliche as hell. I'm definitely not the first person to say that, but man, like, I can't stress that enough. Like, I hate to use myself as an example, but I'm going to go there. Like, if me, a high school dropout, can go from one day being unemployed to building a brand to writing a book to, you know, becoming a best-selling author, like, that's not by mistake at all. And that's not by coincidence. That's hard work. And that's a byproduct of what happens when you build a community and you put yourself out there and connect and engage. And every corporation has the ability to do the same thing. And you know, what a lot of big brands need to do is pay attention to the direct to consumer market. These are, you know, for the most part, internet-based brands, small businesses, startups that are starting to come up. And the reason why they're starting to take business away from traditional big players is because these brands and businesses are socially active. They're getting involved in communities. They understand the power that people have in their hands as personal brands. And you know what? There's not going to be a lot of brands that get it until it's too late, unfortunately.
So I remember seeing something on your own social media earlier in the year where you hit a top influencer list, and you had some really nice comments. I thought a lot of people would, generally talk about, I don't know, maybe too much self promotion, but I mean, you talked a little bit about the grind and how it's taken you a long time to get there, and it's a real tough process. What did being recognized as a top influencer mean to you?
Yeah, here's the thing, man. Like, it's always nice to be recognized amongst colleagues. I recognize that those lists, they create like a false sense of competition.
Exactly.
I'm not competing against anyone. No one's competing against anyone other than yourself and time.
Yeah.
If I didn't write this book and I find myself on my deathbed someday, which I will, I would look back and have regret that I didn't write a book, much less this book. So that's why I say, man, like, it's great to be recognized amongst colleagues. It's nice to humble brag a little bit, but no one really cares about that stuff in the real world. Like, no one's cutting me a check because I was 24 on like
Exactly.
the top 100 social media influencers, man. You still got to show up and do the work. You still got to just show up and deliver. And I think that's something that's lost a lot, man. I really don't like the word influence, social media influencer marketing. I think those words are like used to create a false sense of competition amongst people. We're just talking about followers, man. At the end of the day, like, that doesn't really make you influential, quite frankly. And I think that I'll be honest with you. I know I get heat. Like, trust me, I read what people say. I'm not I'm not naive by any means. I get that my brand doesn't resonate with everyone out there, and I think it doesn't resonate with everyone out there for a couple things. First of all, man, I've done shit the right way. Like, at the end of the day, I've done things the right way. Did I piss some people off along the way? Sure. Am I a different knife in the drawer? I sound different, look different? Sure. Like, I own that. But I've done it the right way, and I also keep it 100% real talk when I step on stage and speak, or when I jump on opportunities like this to speak, because I think there's a lot of bullshit that exists. And I'll be the first to just keep it real with anyone that asks me my thoughts or my perspective.
Yeah, what I appreciated was your humility, because I've seen a lot of people who know their position, think about their position way too much, and then they're not humble about it. So just from that lack of a better phrase, I think for most people, they need to just listen to what somebody's saying instead of checking out how many followers they have.
Do hard work, man.
Exactly.
Do hard work. At the end of the day, I care what my parents think about me, even though I'm an adult. I care what my kids think about me. I care what, my closest, friends, I care what my clients think about me. There's so much noise that happens on social media today that you can't get caught up with, if someone necessarily doesn't like you, or you say the wrong thing. Because, one of the things that was said to me early on my career is you can't make an omelet without cracking a few eggs. And again, I think a lot of those like lists that come out are meant to be used as a device to separate people and to create almost like animosity. So when I shared earlier this year, to your point, I was like pretty high up on this list, I was excited, man, because quite frankly, the only reason why I was excited is because the previous year, I want to say I was like ranked 89 or somewhere like that. And then I was able to show progression. Yeah. And as a professional who's like working hard, why wouldn't I be happy to just state like, hey, if I could do this, you can do it too.
Carlos, you live in LA and pretty close to the beaches, where I'm actually trying to schedule a dive right now. I've got to ask this question. What is your favorite kind of shark and why? As a guy that's lived on both coasts.
Look, man, I don't like any sharks at all. I think they're one of the most deadliest animals. I've never eaten shark. I don't want to swim with a shark. I let you handle that, my man. As a diving extraordinaire, but I can't say that I'm a fan of sharks.
How about a Shark Tank shark, or Bruce from Jaws, or Finding Dory?
I would say if we're going to talk about sharks, I love Mark Cuban. That's
bingo. That's a good one.
Yeah. There we go.
So, Carlos, it is that special time of the show. Are you ready for the 5 most interesting and important questions that you're going to be asked today?
Ooh, I didn't realize there was 5 interesting questions that are coming my way, but
you've been warned.
Drop it like it's hot.
Drop it like it's hot. All right. Number 1, DJ Khaled or Kim Kardashian West. You got to pick one.
Oh, man. Like who I'd like to spend 5 minutes with?
Well,
Pick one.
yeah.
Who I would date one? Like,
No, 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 no.
what's the context here?
No, the context. So you write about them both in your book heavily. There's
I would say
social
DJ
media
Khaled.
profiles. How about that?
Yeah, I would say DJ Khaled. Look, I grew up listening to Khaled. I'm from South Florida. I heard him on 99 Jams as I was growing up as a kid, well before he ever blew up on Snapchat. I become fascinated with his climb and his rise. And like more importantly, like I'm always curious to hear from celebrities how they find ways to stay relevant. And it's interesting, like as I've grown my brand, I've had some access to, interact and meet and become friends with a few different celebrities behind the scenes, and I'm just always fascinated just to get to know them as people.
Yeah.
And there's like an art and a science behind what they do, and that in itself is power.
All right. Number 2, Drake. Everybody likes Drake. Or Ja Rule.
Oh man,
And you've interviewed Ja Rule on stage, so
that's gonna be tough.
Yeah.
I'd say Ja Rule. I'd say my buddy Jeff Atkins, aka Ja Rule. I've had an opportunity to get to know him, both on camera and off camera. I think that he's an individual that a lot of people misunderstand, because of the Fire Festival
Yeah.
and that whole kind of fiasco that happened. But here's my thing, man. If you really want to get answers to anything in life, you just go straight to the source. Instead of gossiping online, just go straight to the source.
Yeah.
And granted, not everyone necessarily has that opportunity, but a lot of these celebrities, they're real people. Well, not a lot of them, all of them. They're all real people.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, they wake up like we do. They go to sleep like we do. They have feelings like we do, and they're real people. So I don't know Drake. I would love to meet him at some point. Love his music, but if we're kind of picking either or, I'd say Ja.
Yeah, Ja's always on time, despite a cheese sandwich. But hey, if that thing had worked, I mean, if that thing had worked, how much bigger, if it hadn't been a rainstorm and a couple other little things mess up. I say a couple other little things, a couple other major things. But if it had been for a massive rainstorm and a couple other things, it could have skyrocketed. I mean, it just would have been amazing. What could have happened?
I think the lesson for that, for people to take away is, man, audit who you go to bed with in business.
Yeah.
Right.
Agreed.
Like whoever your business partners become, who they are. I know, like, it's really exciting. Like I've kind of fallen into this a lot of times throughout my career, where like you meet someone, you have drinks, you're talking about all these ideas, and like all of a sudden you're going into business with someone, and you don't know truly who they are. I think that's perhaps the biggest key takeaway that anyone that watches what any celebrity gets into and then wants to just criticize them, like there's always more to the story. And I think that is a key takeaway that people should watch Fire Festival and then, say to themselves like, wow, this is a lesson for me to really audit who I work with.
Agreed. Number 3, the beaches of California or the beaches of Florida?
Man, come on. Is that even a question?
Oh, it depends.
Is that even a question?
I mean, I'm white sands of Northwest Florida, but the waters of California, and I'll take the Gulf, but I'll take the Gulf any day, to be quite honest.
Let me break this down for you, my man. Okay, succinctly. I'm a native Floridian through and through. So of course I'm always going to say Florida. I do think LA has better weather, I will say, or
Yeah.
California does have better weather, but I've never actually been in the water in California. I used to live in San Francisco.
12
I live in LA now.
degrees.
It is
horrible.
freezing. Like as a kid, I always would watch Baywatch and think that
yeah.
the beaches here were just like, hot and warm and tropical.
No.
Absolutely not. It is freezing. So just that alone, if you want to go in the water and enjoy yourself, you go to Florida.
Yeah, you don't need a 5 millimeter, diving suit to go swimming. You shouldn't need that anyway. It's
Absolutely.
I'm not a fan of those waters. But anyway, another influencer question for you here, and another Kardashian. Kendall Jenner or Lil Miquela?
Ooh, that's tough. Ah, man. You stumped me on that.
Yeah,
one.
that was. You want to go
And
AI
so-
or a real one?
I would say what I find more fascinating is Lil Miquela, quite frankly. I think any person can be built up to be influential with the right mix of money and content. But what fascinates me about Lil Miquela is that she is not a real person, looks like a real person, gets brand deals like a real person, but she's owned by someone that programmed her.
Yeah. Agreed.
When you really think about it, you don't have to pay a talent fee to Lil Michaela other than paying a talent fee to the person that made her on a computer.
Agreed. All right, number 5, and the most important question that you're going to be asked today is biscuits or cornbread?
Oh, come on, man. Biscuits all day.
Thank you. I know a man from Florida. So
biscuits all day, baby.
So, Carlos, where do you want people to find out more about you, keep up with what you're doing? I'll post, obviously, a link for people to get a copy of the book, but where do you want people to find more about you?
Well, first of all, Kenneth, I would love to do like an hour of just these questions of like either or.
Oh, I know.
I think that's really fun.
Yeah, it's my favorite part.
It's really cool. Once again, thank you so much for having me on your show. I really appreciate it. I would love anyone listening to this to go to endofmarketingbook.com and get the End of Marketing. This is a book that is a culmination of 11 years of my career. There's just immense value that you're going to get from reading the book. Every single chapter, like, I'm not saying it just to like hype myself up, but like every single chapter is just information packed. There's key takeaways. Even if you just open up any page on the book, I guarantee you're going to learn something. So go to endofmarketingbook.com. Also, hit me up and follow me on social media. At Carlos Gil 83 is my handle. You can find me on Twitter as well as on Instagram.
Carlos, appreciate that you gave me this much time.
All right. Thank you so much.
So there was my conversation with Carlos Gil, the CEO and founder of Gil Media, a social media strategist and storyteller, a speaker, and an author of a provocative new book called The End of Marketing. Let's take a look at 3 key takeaways from my conversation with him. First, so what's the state of marketing as we know it? In his words, and I quote, "Marketing as we know it has been dead for a while, and we, the marketers, and those of us who are using social media to sell are watering down the product every single day." I love his comparison with radio to premium Pandora subscriptions. One big part of the equation that I always see is that a lot of marketers at brands are not in fact marketers. They don't truly think like marketers, and that's part of this problem. Now, I often call them branders instead. You know who they are. They're often more project managers pushing work to marketing teams. And by the way, there's definitely a needed place for that, but that's also creating some of the problem. Carlos makes a point about how they're not necessarily considered thought leaders in the space. You don't see them speaking at conferences consistently or publishing bestsellers, or they're really junior and don't have the juice to sell this change to their bosses. Yet a lot of them get it and understand the need to change. Those are the ones he sees as fertile ground, if you will, for helping drive this change. And if you want to grow a brand, then you need an army of advocates, especially your employees. And that's a way to begin to learn to future-proof your brand. Think like a marketer, especially in regards to your social media. A lot of this simply is changing and advancing a different mindset and breaking a few eggs. And as he said, marketing is dead if we don't put the social back into social media. Second, a big point of his is that if your brand is going to survive the AI apocalypse with all the automation and bots, then you need to humanize your brand by replacing the logo with a face. As another friend of mine, Mark Schaefer, a top influencer, often says, the most human brand wins. It's broadly stated, but this is a perfect reflection of Carlos's specific point. Brands need to learn that they're competing with people. To me, I find that it's so true with SMBs today who reach out to me for consulting advice. Now, I don't know if you'll see my face instead of a great white on my logo, but that's because the great white's much better looking. Third, what most companies do is they push content and assume that people are going to want to convert and buy. That's true everywhere and with every channel, but social is a different animal, different kind of marketplace, if you will. Carlos and I will likely differ with how aggressive to place ads on Facebook. I'm much more type A. However, I couldn't agree more with him on how he talks about producing the right kind of content that draws people into your site rather than just selling. It should be more contextual based to those who like your brand and not just irrelevant ads in context that doesn't matter to them. Carlos says he sells on social media, but he nurtures and builds his followers first. One of my favorite quotes of his was, brands need to reverse engineer what marketing really is, and then instead of expecting consumers to flock to them, they need to go flock to consumers. They need to create content that's perceived as being real and relatable. You start with your employees, you start with your customers. Now, he's not a fan of influencer marketing, and I don't agree with that, but to his earlier quote, couldn't agree more. And a rare fourth and needed clarification. Comments were in jest, but my biggest contradiction with Carlos is, of course, to clarify that sharks are not the deadly creatures that everybody thinks they are. I've been extremely lucky in my life to swim with some of the most beautiful, docile creatures in the world. The water's my happy place. Beware, it's their territory, but you probably need to be aware of those falling coconuts more. Got a question? Send me an email to kenneth@asharksperspective.com. Thank you for the privilege of your time. And as today's guest said, it's a great big digital ocean and you've either got to sink or swim. So swim with your favorite marketing shark and join us on the next episode of A Shark's Perspective.